So we talked to Sarah King today on today's episode, and
Can you say today's episode one more time?
today's episode.
You said today's episode like 3 times.
I want people to know which episode it is.
Today's.
On this episode, we spoke to Sarah King, and this was our first episode back after a little break. I think it was our work break.
A little hiatus.
Like, yeah, hibernation, hiatus, whatever. So there was some rust at the beginning there, but she was very gracious and bore with us.
What Colin's trying to say is I botched the intro, and just stick with us. Like 2 minutes in, it gets great again.
It gets so good.
Sarah brought a lot of great info, a lot of real life stuff.
She was very transparent about a lot of different things in her life. She's doing real estate investing. She recently spoke at BPCon, the Bigger Pockets conference. She raises private money through social media. She's not a nurse, but she works as a liaison for medical companies. So she's very involved in the medical field.
Genetic testing type stuff.
Words that we are not good at saying.
Fancy, smart words for smart people to say.
But it's a great episode. And yes, once you get through that beginning where we're just stumbling, it gets good.
Have a good listen.
Have a good listen.
All right, welcome to the Investing RN podcast. We are here today with Sarah King, and she is doing a lot of cool stuff, and she's going to tell us all about it. Sarah, welcome.
Hi, guys. How are you? Thanks for having me.
So Sarah, you are doing stuff in healthcare, sort of, is what I hear. So
Yeah.
What do you do exactly?
So since, trying to think when I graduated, 2014, I've been in the healthcare industry. And so for about 5 years, so my degree is genetic counseling. So I have a master's in genetics and specifically in genetic counseling. And so I worked for several years in a couple different clinics and things. I live in the Midwest. I worked in Grand Rapids and in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And through that, I did a lot of different hats. I've done high-risk pregnancy. I've done, so in a maternal fetal medicine office, I've done a little bit of cardiovascular genetics, a little bit of peds smattered in there, and kind of whatever is needed at the time. And then about 2018, I transitioned to the dark side of medicine, which is industry. So on the other side of things, which is kind of by design. So I got really into the financial independence movement, which we can talk about, and just try to do everything I could to get my income up as, you know, someone that loved clinic, but also likes to make money and having a higher earning trajectory. And so now I've been a medical science liaison for about 4 years. No, longer than that. I'm getting old. 6 years. So I've been doing that for about 6 years. And so in a nutshell, what being an MSL is I'm just a really fancy educator. So when the sales folks at my company go in out in the field and talk about assays and genetic tests and things, when providers like you guys or, you know, physicians or whoever that salesperson is talking to have medical questions, I'm the super nerd that gets to answer them.
Oh, so, nice.
That is what I do all day. And I work from home mostly. And then I travel a little bit to give like presentations. I'm the person you like because we bring you like lunch and nice spread, and you get to listen to me talk about genetics.
This episode is sponsored by All Day Investments. If you would like to get your start in real estate investing, but don't want to deal with toilets or tenants, we have several new opportunities that might interest you. Head over to alldayinvestments.co/invest or follow the link in our show notes to book a call with our team.
Yeah, so we love people like you.
Oncology, yeah.
So I as you're speaking, I realized how terrible of a job I did introducing you. So you're doing a lot of real estate investing.
I'm doing a lot of real estate investing. So that's...
You're doing a lot of other stuff. Yeah. And thank you for that.
I shouldn't have sprung that on you last minute like that, Josh. I'm sorry.
I was so unprepared.
Just all the things today leading up to this, I was just like, I can't do this. Josh has this, and turns out I was wrong.
We're gonna get there. It's fine.
Yeah.
No.
It sounds like you're very involved, even though you're not a nurse. You're very involved in the medical field, obviously working hand in hand with nurses.
Yeah.
Kind of similar. I mean, I don't know. I guess there's burnout in every job, but that's part of the reason we're talking to nurses specifically and healthcare workers is just like with the high rates of burnout right now.
Yeah.
Did you like your W-2 job, or do you still like your W-2 job? What kind of, I mean, we'll get to it soon that you're investing, but what kind of led you to that?
Yeah. I mean, burnout is a huge thing. I mean, a lot of nurses and folks had a much harder time during COVID because there's no like urgent genetic situation you're ever going to enter in. So I feel like the rate of burnout amongst my nurse friends was definitely a lot higher kind of during that time period. But I think in anywhere in healthcare, like we can all kind of relate to, I remember feeling like I needed to transition because I love my job. I love genetic counseling, but I would go to the hospital and it would be dark and I'd sit in my car and I found myself not wanting to come in the building because when I would walk back out, it would also be dark again because I was in oncology at that point and we were doing morning tumor boards, we were doing afternoon tumor boards, and patients were getting presented and we had to be there in case they needed, family histories or genetic testing that would guide their treatment. And so, you just got really sick about, and it was before I had kids and, I was like, I can't imagine doing this and having a family and going in when it's dark and leaving when it's dark. And I just felt like something had to give. And that kind of started my burnout journey. And then got into a job that I loved. And then like a restructure happened. And then I ended up in a job that I didn't like. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. I need to get out of this and do real estate full time. And so I kind of went like all in mad into real estate to build myself kind of a second income stream, and then took a new position because I'm like, well, it's not time to retire off real estate yet. Turns out it's a lot of work and a lot of units or I guess a lot, air quotes. I'm still on the search for the right number. But it takes a lot to actually be able to live off that, especially once you get used to a higher salary. Like I definitely feel the lifestyle creep happening. And so now I'm in a job, a W-2 third MSL job, and I absolutely love it. And so then I had this whole year of, holy shit, what am I doing? Sorry if I'm allowed to say that on here. Where I'm like, okay, I just like killed myself in real estate and now I like my job and I want to stay. So now it's kind of retransitioning back into, I'd love to stay in this W-2 job as long as I can because it's pretty awesome and my team is great. And about half my team is actually nurses and nurse practitioners, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. Those are the best people, of course.
Yeah.
No.
They'll take my weird calls to ask them things.
So, yeah, your journey, a lot of shifting and moving around, and that's something that's good. We talk about nurses a lot because we are nurses, but that's something that a lot of nurses they're not comfortable job hopping. And I know that was something that you kind of put in your little bio thing. Is that you should be okay with it. Like find something that you enjoy so you don't feel like you have to leave right now.
I think my rude awakening shortly after grad school was watching how kind of quickly you can be replaced in healthcare and how quickly, like 1 week they're saying they depend on you and the next week that person left and someone new is hired in and you like never speak to that person again, even though you swore you'd catch up with each other. And just seeing the replaceability of people, I'm like, I don't know why I'm not prioritizing myself a bit more. And then you hear all the older generations around you saying, don't job hop. That's going to look terrible on a resume. And this is going to be so bad and no one's ever going to hire you. But I was kind of always on this quest. And, some of my job changes weren't intentional. Some of them were. But, working through that and making sure that you're kind of prioritizing, okay, what do I want for myself and my family? What kind of hours do I want to work? What kind of, time do I want to see my kids? Do I want to be in the hospital a lot? And how does that all work with the whole, like, I'd like to retire early potentially aspect of things. And so I really got serious about more prioritizing my mental health along the way and kind of saying, jobs are a tool and income's a tool. And I really pressed hard on the lever of just getting my income up as fast as I could. And then I read these amazing stats out there that say, people who change jobs every 2 to 3 years make so much more money than people that stay in a job for 50 years, especially at a hospital. So every time I've hopped companies, I've really, really increased my income. And so that's a whole journey that we can talk numbers too, if you want, because it's kind of interesting. Just to kind of hop the ladder to say, okay, if I just prioritize financial independence for my family, spending time with my kids being my why, and just go after it and try to raise my income, what will that look like? And I haven't ever had an issue with, I guess, it barring me from getting employed.
I think right now with everything, because I actually have been out of nursing for 2 years, and I don't know when this is going to air. I might be a nurse again by the time this airs. I mean, I've always been a nurse, but like it's just like having having that as a background is great for us. It sounds like you've had the same flexibility in what you're doing, but like being able to. I mean, Josh is always preaching like, I don't want, there's a hard way to say this without him sounding bad, but it's like, don't be loyal to like one company.
I agree.
It's not that. It's just, but it's essentially what you're saying. Like by jumping around, you can increase that. And I guess after you say something, Josh, I would kind of like to know how that has worked as you've jumped from one to the next in terms of pay increases.
Yeah.
No, I don't mind sounding bad if that comes out wrong, because it worked so well for me, and it sounds like it worked so well for you. Like we're in a different generation. Like people don't value loyalty anymore.
Right.
If you can be loyal to whoever you want to, but they're not going to be loyal back to you anymore. So
right. Yeah.
You got to take care of yourself first.
And it was so hard to learn. Like you could be like very specialized in your area and be an expert in the room, and you'd watch other people get promoted because they were liked more, and it just was devastating because I cared so much about what I was doing, and I'm like, it's getting me nowhere and I'm burned out. And I'm like, I'm not going to do this at the expense of my family. And so I really just pivoted to the people that matter most in life, prioritizing them. And that meant jobs are a tool for better or worse. I mean, I love certain jobs and certain teams. I've had the pleasure of being on some amazing teams. I've had teams that weren't a good fit because I'm kind of an out of the box thinker. And so if you ever end up in a profession that's very box checking and you have any entrepreneurial spirit, it's a bad idea to be stuck with checklists all around you. It's a little daunting, but yeah, it's worth it.
So I knew Colleen mentioned it earlier, but we do want to kind of ask you numbers since you're comfortable saying the numbers. So let's get into the numbers. But first, I have a question that I will probably forget if I can ask. So you do genetic testing. Do you ever have a conversation that's like, do you ever talk to the family of these babies or whatever, and it's like you're bringing them good news, or is it only because what I imagine, and you kind of mentioned it before we started recording, is that you're dealing with like pain and like, oh, your baby's not, I don't want to say normal, but there's going to be struggles. Do you ever have a conversation that's like lighthearted, or how do you deal with that, I guess?
So for a while, I worked with a lot of families in very difficult situations. Like we had a period of time where our office was just covered by locums physicians who, it's like every week you had like a new doctor, or every other week you'd have a new doctor. And so somehow I got tasked with giving bad news for a bit, and that was really hard. And families would be like, you can put it on your business card, like, I make this suck less, because at least I knew I could relay it in a way that was mindful of the family. There is good news in genetics because we do a lot of testing, and a lot of times we don't find anything. So that's a good thing. So like carrier testing, or if you do a screening test for like Down syndrome or trisomy 18 and 20 or 18 and 13, goodness gracious, I've been out of it for a while. And, a lot of times those come back healthy and normal, like by far. So a lot of women so I'm on the verge of advanced maternal age. So I'm 34. I'm going to be 35 this year. And so my advanced maternal age moms would come in and be like, I know it's bad. And I'm like, actually, the outlook is really positive. Like, let's talk about, like, more likely than not, you won't have one of these genetic conditions. If you are, you're in the right place for us to help you and support you and figure out what to do. And a lot of times they would just come in very doomsday. It was, a lot of times you do get good news. I would say oncology, which, cancer seems really sad, but a lot of times you're helping families with a disease they know has been in their family for a long time. And so sometimes putting a name to it and giving people answers is more important than the fear of the unknown for them. So while oncology sounds really sad, it's nice because there's so much we can do now in the oncology field that's proactive or specialized or personalized medicine that we just didn't have those tools years ago. So I will say, oncology is the happiest of the genetic counseling jobs, but I have had doctors look at me and go, do you just feel like you're like the crypt keeper some days, where you're like, she's coming down the hall with the box? And I'm like, so, days like today, yes, Dr. Smith.
That sounds terrible.
Sorry.
Don't know how to bridge that. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I don't know how you transition from that to like, okay, so how much money do you make from that? But yeah, I mean, I think it's it's all how you spin it. And it's like somebody has to deliver that news. So thank goodness there is somebody like you that makes it suck less. Cause yeah, I mean, I've never been good with that. I'm always just like, the doctor's going to come in and talk to you. So, it's, I mean,
Right.
it's tough. And it's like, obviously like the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. So
it's still a ripping off the Band-Aid
oh
thing
yeah,
every time.
yeah. But I think it's a calling too. I think not everybody's cut out for it. So good for you. So as you've gone from that oncology now to something a little more uplifting, it sounds like, how has the pay come along with you?
Okay, so fresh out of grad school, this would have been about 2012. My beginning salary, I think, was $86,000. I have my like income numbers from every year, and I started tracking it really in 2016. So 2 years later, and I was married at the time, and then we were making $109,000, and I was making about 62 of that. And I was like, this is sweet. You're out of grad school. You're finally making money instead of watching it go out in giant checks to whatever university you're going to. And so I think there's this thing in healthcare where you just get so excited to finally be making money. And then you learn you're going to get like a 2 to 3% raise every year. And like, this is sweet. This is great. I should be grateful for these cost of living raises every year. And then really in 2018, I transitioned out of my clinic job. I think by the end I was making about 63,000, and then switched into industry, and I was making, so back then I was at 110, I believe, really close to that. I think it was 108. And so then my husband and I were making 155,000 a year. And so that's kind of how that scaled. And then once I left that job, so that job, I actually, they sold off the product I was supporting. So I'm like, we were the women's health team, and all of a sudden we were women's health team with no women's health products. So that's a little scary. You're like, the writing is on the wall. I have to get out of here. And so I job hopped then kind of out of necessity. And so I slowly saw our team kind of dwindling and downsizing. And at the same time, I was actually in the process of getting divorced. And so I finally started tracking just my own income over the years. And I actually made, I think in 138,000. So kind of creeping up the ladder. And that was back when I could still like do some fun things with real estate. I was just kind of starting that investment strategy. And so I think my gross for the year was like 174. Which is pretty exciting. So every job I kind of hopped, I did a pay raise. And so then my next job, I was making about 130. And that was super exciting because I'm like, here I am making $100 and some $1,000. This is great. And then with bonuses and things, you made more. So in 2020 by myself, I made 119,000. And then by 2021, it was 161. And that was like, I'm like, I've hit the top. I've hit the peak of my life. Like, this is awesome. But I absolutely hated my job. And that was a job prior to this. And I'm like, that's when I felt super burnout. And at that point, the whole $161,000 was all just me as a single mom trying to figure it out. And I had a very young daughter. So she's 4 now. But she was 3 months old when I became a single mom. So my husband actually developed a drug addiction out of the blue. And I promptly got out of that really terrible situation. And then just started to chase, okay, if I only have one income, I want some stability. And so I looked for certain companies that were stable, and then just something that could give us a good future. And I knew this job that I didn't like waking up for every day was not the thing. And so I started really heavily job hunting. And so this year I finally got my first like full year at my new company. And so I made $235,000 this year.
Wow.
So I've really gone up the pay scale with a lot of job hopping.
Yeah.
So I think I've changed jobs 5 times and gone from 58,000 to my base salary is technically 215, and then I get an annual bonus.
Wow.
That's a little bit.
That is a very significant increase, I think. For, I guess, please job hop. It's great over here. And I actually found a job that has like seems to be better work-life balance, but yet they're paying me more. And I thought it had to be a trade-off. And so now I'm like, please keep me here forever. Stay employed here.
So it's a little bit more than an average of 2% annual raise starting at 60 grand or whatever. A little bit.
And I used to be excited about that. Yeah.
I guess when you're doing these different jobs, then it shows that you're capable of doing different jobs, as opposed to like, well, this person's been at this one company for like 20 years. How are they going to adapt? It's like, well, clearly you can adapt. You've done it. So
I did get the job interview question about my work history, but it didn't slow them down. I'm like, some companies just weren't a good fit. Like my hospital job was like rotating locums and it was very inconsistent. And I just got so sick of, what doctor is coming in, what are their preferences, what are we doing this week? And it was hard to feel established there. And so I kind of left based on instability partly, but also pay. But then other jobs, I've dodged some layoffs. So the one job I left where I'm like, we're going to be gone at any minute, my entire team got laid off like a month later. But they all got this like amazing severance and went on a trip that summer. And I was like working and hating my life. So I don't really know who won in that situation, but I did dodge the layoff. So
we're talking about difficult topics here. And you mentioned your divorce and
Yes.
you seem to be okay talking about it because you brought it up.
Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot about that aside from like the winner always gets 50% of the other person's stuff, right? Something like that. So what did that look like from you? Because it sounds like you were definitely the higher income earner. So did you have to, I guess, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I made about 60% of our income and he made about 40% because you have to figure this out on like child support worksheets and stuff. And so, yeah, it was really, well, first of all, you're just like an emotional hot mess. Like no matter how stable of an individual you are, you're just a mess and you're trying to make very big adult decisions when your life is being torn apart. And so I think the biggest thing is I'm really organized. And so I just made a really long itemized list of everything we had. So how much I knew were in my bank accounts, how much I knew were in his bank accounts, like what cars and vehicles we owned. It actually worked out really well in my favor because part of my career journey has led me to jobs that they provide a company car. And so I could offset a lot of, because he had several vehicles and I had no car technically to my name. It was a company vehicle that I drove. And so for the last, 6 years, I haven't technically owned a car, but I have a car I drive everywhere that's from my employer. And so I was able to kind of make a solid list of, he had a lot more assets than I have. I'm kind of more minimalist and don't keep a lot of stuff around. And then I had to become very mobile as I like moved around, moved back in with my parents for 3 months. That was humbling. And then I was like, I'm 30 years old with a good job. I should not be living with mom and dad with a less than 1-year-old. But at the time it was a necessity. And so in the end, and we actually owned real estate then. So he was the first one that said, let's do real estate, which was really interesting. And so we owned 5 properties together and he was not in a very good, like, emotional space, as you can imagine at the time. And so, every time we would go to mediation, he would want to have a different house that he kept. And so finally I'm like, let's just sell everything because I don't want to talk about this anymore. And so we ended up selling 5 properties that we owned together and split that in the divorce proceedings. So I was able to keep all of my IRAs and things I had at the time, which wasn't a ton, probably around $100,000, and then kind of shift like some proceeds of the real estate around. And then he had a lot more assets to list. So in the end, it wasn't that bad, I would say. At the time, it was horrible. But looking back now, I'm very happy with how it all worked out because all the real estate I currently own is mine, that I've now bought kind of by myself. And that's kind of a badass thing to be able to say as a woman. And so there's a little bit of pride there. But at the time, I'm like, I've been managing all these tenants. This is ridiculous. Why am I selling houses? Like, he doesn't even know the name of the person that lives in this one anymore. And so, yeah, it was frustrating. But the amount of money you throw at a lawyer, though, will make you sick. So I was definitely very grateful to have a solid, good job at the time. Kind of going through all of that because that was the thing I didn't need to work through, was kind of that part on where your income comes from. But that really spurred my, I have to really get serious about real estate and financial independence because I've seen overnight how one day your whole life can change and you lose a second income stream that you thought you'd have. Kind of a life-altering decision time.
You guys sold the portfolio, and then you said you moved in with your parents. You had a 3-month-old. Did you kind of take a pause on real estate for a period of time? Because I know my wife and I, she's almost 3 now. But as we're trying to build this real estate thing, even without the nursing jobs, it's just a lot. And like my parents are close by, they'll help out a little bit, but it's like, it's a lot to have the kid, and like she's not in daycare, so like that makes it tough. So did you have to scale it back, or when did you start that back up?
So we sold. So I was living with my parents and was like, okay, I have a good job. I have this car, so I don't have to worry about that. And I've always had this dream of house hacking, but my husband would never do it. And I'm like, this is the perfect time to like, this will be my start out on my own as an adult. Again, is to get us a home, because I just didn't want to be living with them forever. I love my family, but you just feel so bad. But I mean, we experienced really cool things at a time when the whole world was disconnected, because this is all during COVID. And so I got the pleasure of living with my parents, and they got to see my daughter take her first steps at their house, which was super cool, and really be there every day. But I would still drive her to childcare every single day so I could get my work done. And then my parents would be kind of backup, but my dad's older and can't get around as well anymore. And so they're like, we cannot be full-time parents ourselves. And so it was kind of nice. We kind of kept her life normal. And then I started hunting for house hacks, and went that way to kind of get into real estate. So for the first year of my, I guess, solo real estate journey, it was all about finding and buying a house hack and then remodeling the unit that was going to be rented out, just because I'm bleeding expenses. This attorney is really costly. And so I want to not live with mom and dad, but I need to live for free. And I was able to kind of backwards problem solve that and figure that out, which was pretty cool. Even though I really knew nothing about remodeling at all, because my ex-husband was like the remodeling expert. He's still to this day like the best tile guy I've ever had. But you learn all about the trades as you start doing it on your own.
So you moved out of your parents into your first house hack.
Yeah.
So can you go through the numbers a little bit with that? But before you do, I've been pushing a little bit of a house hack. Yeah. And my wife's not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So how were you comfortable with that? Because at this point you were a single mom. So how are you comfortable with being in a house hack?
I mean, it was a completely separate unit. It wasn't like I was doing like the rent by the room thing. So I actually bought a single family home on a walkout basement, and the walkout basement had a mother-in-law suite. So it already was kind of laid out to be a second unit. And so I was able to seal the top and the bottom completely separate. So they have their own entrance out the backyard. They have their own patio, deck, grill, kind of everything, their own separate driveway down the side of the property. And so, but it cost a lot of money because it was not in a pretty state when I bought the house. Like I think all the walls were black or burgundy in the basement, which, you know, my dream basement color is black. Not said no one ever. And so it did have an egress window, a full kitchen, a bathroom down there, and a second window kind of next to the walkout. So I knew I had essentially 3 holes in the building, so it could be a 2-bedroom. And that's really what I was looking for. I learned this model from like a friend of mine who invests in real estate. And so because he does a lot of up-down duplex converts, and there wasn't a lot of duplexes in my market, but everyone climbed out of the woodwork to tell me it was a bad idea to live with like guests below me in a rental unit. And I was just like so determined to not have to pay $1,000 mortgage every month while I'm paying my lawyer probably more than $1,000 a month. And so I'm like, you know, this isn't forever. This is like a 2 to 3 year endeavor, and then I'll move on. So I think it was like, it's temporary, and I started to enjoy the more people thought I was going crazy, because I'm like, my life is in shambles. It's whatever at this point. I think the best part about divorce is just like, you don't care anymore. You're like, I'm just doing this. I just really don't care what you have to say about it. This is the plan.
So while everybody's telling you all of the bad things about house hacking, can you tell us why it was such a good idea?
I live for free in a really beautiful house, and that house is appreciated by far the most out of any of my properties. I also use private money as a down payment on that. Actually, no, I use private money to buy that house completely, and that was my first foray into private money. And so I kind of built my street cred out for what would be the rest of my next couple years investing, just by chance, because I'm like, I don't want my ex-husband to have any say in this property whatsoever. And so I don't want I didn't want my name on it, let alone his name. And so I ended up figuring that out with family and my parents. And they were my first private money lender. And we've since done 3 different deals now together. But I knew my numbers and I was very determined to make it happen.
So some of our listeners are probably familiar with real estate investing and private money and all that, but can you kind of tell us, like, you mentioned that your parents were your investors, but like how you went about finding this private money and how you structured it all and like the payoff and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So I picked out a house, or we looked for a house, and they knew this is kind of the plan, because I'm like, I am bankable. I have a great W-2 job. I could go buy this house. I went and got a mortgage pre-approval. I even had like the funds by then, because I could buy it like as a first time home buyer, but it was a conventional loan. And so I could show that I was bankable. I had this lovely income and was kind of doing all the right things. And then I scrapped together this, what I call like a private money pitch now. So private money is when you go to friends, family, acquaintances. I borrow money now the most from people from Instagram, which is kind of interesting. And so, but then I didn't really have any connections and hadn't really had a track record, but I think they were supportive of the fact that we needed a fresh start, and that, I put together like all these spreadsheets. My dad's like, I don't want to walk through all those with you. That looks like a crazy person made them, because I came with like all the things, and like, look at my Excel documents. Aren't they awesome? And they're just like, oh my gosh, she's very determined to make this happen. And then I'd also found a hard money loan, and that actually ended up being the kicker, because I'm like, if you guys don't do it with private money, I'm taking out a hard money loan at 10% for like a year. And my dad was devastated that I could ever imagine taking out a 10%, hard money loan for a year, but I knew the numbers worked. And they're like, that's ridiculous at this time in your life. You don't need a 10%. We can at least beat that interest rate. And so that's kind of how we got into it. Was they weren't super gung-ho about it until I was like, I will be taking out this more aggressive mortgage, but if you'd like to help me out and find some middle ground, I would be very grateful for that. And in a year, you'll have your money back. And that's exactly how it worked out, which was cool.
Yeah.
And that was the first closing I had ever done, where you left with a check, and it was a whopping like $980,000 or $980. It was less than $1,000, but I got a check when I left closing. I'm like, this is sweet. It really worked. So it was pretty cool.
That check at closing is like, you feel like you're like a genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that happen?
I'm like, no one cares that I made $900 on Instagram. Like, people are posting all these ridiculous checks then. And I'm like,
yeah.
I was so excited, because I'm like, it really does happen.
Well, that's it. It's just proof of concept. It's like, hey, it doesn't matter if it's like $10 or 100,000. I mean, obviously 100,000 is nice, but it's just like that you did it, and it's like you didn't lose your shirt over it or whatever.
And I put all my own money into remodeling. So essentially, the money I would have put down for the deal originally became the remodel money for the second unit downstairs, which worked out perfectly. So yeah. And then I knew what I had to rent it out for to show some extra income on the property to kind of get it financed where I needed it to be.
Yeah.
So, and that is a beautiful 2.6% interest rate still.
Oh, wow.
Still. Oh, that's whew.
Yeah.
What is
so
that like?
People have asked for me to sell that house, because you could very easily make it another, like a 5-bedroom again. And I'm like, no, that house is staying with me forever. That was kind of the proof of concept house.
Like, that's the house that makes me a millionaire.
Yeah.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned getting money from Instagram. So how are you structuring money now?
So Instagram, I'm usually still borrowing just down payment money. And so usually I'm ranging between 8 to 10%. Lately, it's been like 10 or 11% on private money. And then it's flexible on terms. So I did like one flip this year, and that was a 6-month note where I didn't make payments, and then I just did a balloon at the end. But kind of my bread and butter is finding people to do I'm trying to switch to longer term investing because I really want some more runway with the current interest rate market. And so I've been trying to do 1 to 2 year notes, specifically really 2 to 3 would be the dream because I like a 2-year runway to get some forced appreciation out of houses. And so that's kind of what I've been doing, is just borrowing money about 10 to 11%. Yeah. You get a periodic, like once a month interest only payment with a balloon at the end after the 2-year period with the option to do an extension.
We are kind of, we've built a decent little real estate portfolio together, and we've used money from Josh's parents and, kind of private money loan. But now as we're trying to scale, we do mobile home parks. As we're trying to scale that,
Nice.
We're looking at this. And like one of, I think the struggles that we have is that we are not the organized people that have documented like every pay raise and everything like that.
Yeah.
So like as we're going out, it's like we're trying to like show our credibility through some sort of like track record or something like that. So what are you using? Because obviously it's one thing with family, but on social media, I don't know how well you know these people, but how are you kind of, I guess, like showing yourself as a credible person?
Right. So I started doing some webinars and things on like I started out just doing like what is private money, and then I kind of transitioned into how do you find someone that you find credible for private money, and that's been going pretty well, and doing that a bit. I actually got the honor of speaking at 𝗍𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃 this year on this exact topic. So I was on a panel to talk about private money. That was huge. But I've just kind of curated this list of people. And then I also have a link in my bio to just a Google form that says, like, if you want to invest with me, like for the last like month or two, my website has been down and I can't figure out like Cloudflare or whatever is making it go. And so currently in my bio, I just have 2 things. And one of them is linked to, join my private money list with a survey about kind of what they're looking for. Because I only like debt partnerships, essentially people that will hand me the money and say, do what you want and give it back to me at the end and don't ask a lot of questions. And so that's kind of my goal, is I don't like to be super hands-on. I also don't like to share equity, but I think that's my divorce PTSD, where I had to give up my real estate portfolio. So now when people like split equity, I'm like, over my cold dead body, do I want to split any equity with anyone? This is all mine. So for better or worse, that is the partnership I look for, is just a debt piece, not an equity piece. I've become like 𝗟𝗚 the turtle, if you guys have ever read that Dr. Seuss book, where it's like all that is mine.
No.
And so, yeah, but I think, so when I actually do the webinars and things, it's usually like a lead magnet type of situation. So you're funneling them in where they kind of know you, they like you, they're interested in what you're doing from social media. Then if they join, say, your webinar or this list, they believe in you enough to be like, okay, let's at least have a conversation now. And then if I have a deal, I'll start sending out emails to people that are interested. Lately, it's been text messages as I start to get to know kind of repeat lenders now, because I've now paid people back and they want to reinvest, which is awesome. And so we'll do a lot of things, but I have like a whole pitch deck. I think it also might be in my bio. I think that is the second link. It's just a private money pitch deck. And so it's kind of a hybrid monster from a few other people that have done it, plus my own experience of doing it, where I've moved from the horrific Excel spreadsheet version to this like beautiful pitch deck about the property, and kind of figure out how to do numbers a little more interesting. And then at the end of the deck, I always do a who am I and what's my real estate portfolio look like. And at the end, I talk about the different ways I've now paid back private money in different ways beyond refinancing, because that's kind of changed in this market. So I like to be able to say that I've paid over half the private money I've borrowed back now. And I think that's unique in the marketplace. So that is helped a bit. But I'm still hoping to eventually move from like borrowing down payments to borrowing the full amount. I just haven't quite made that hop yet. So I don't know if that's a limiting belief, or I need to get out there and hit the ground more.
So are you finding people with just a ton of cash in their accounts? Or I saw something where you're using self-directed IRAs. Where are you getting most of your money from?
Most of my money are individuals that have self-directed IRAs. So IRAs they've essentially put to work, and usually they're over $100,000. So that's usually what I look for now. So most of the time when I go down the list, I'll only start reaching out to people that have $100,000 or more to invest. with the goal of someday borrowing a little bit more than like 40,000 or 60,000 at a time.
Yeah. Is that so? Do you go for self-directed IRAs because, I mean, me, for example, like I never looked at my 401k or self-directed anything. Like, is that the avatar you're looking for? Because they don't really care if it comes back in the year or two, or
right.
Or is it just like, I don't know.
So 2 reasons, and I figured this out the hard way just from learning. So the first thing is I like that they like the interest they earn stays in their IRA. So they have no interest in like recycling it as quickly. Some people just like the activity of real estate investing and still want it back in 6 months or so. But as I'm trying to build out this portfolio of people that are private money lenders to me over consecutive deals, I'm looking for someone that we can build up this long-term relationship, and maybe they'll just lend it out and just I can keep paying them interest over time and not have to, refi as quick and things. So giving myself the runway in a time when interest rates are crazy. And then the second thing I learned when interest rates became a bloodbath was a lot of younger investors, which I feel like you find this group of younger investors on Instagram that have money and want to invest in real estate, but a lot of them were investing off of their own HELOCs or lines of credit. And as some of my really good friends where we've talked about, doing deals over the years together, as interest rates started shooting up, they're like, my HELOC is at 8%. So I have to be making 10 to 12%. I'm like, dear Lord, money got very expensive very fast. And so I started looking for like older private money that was a little more seasoned. So people that have super saved in an IRA where it's not going to be on this revolving rate, because I started getting the question from people, since it's on a line of credit and we have no idea how high interest rates are going, would you be willing to do private money on a floating rate? And I'm like, over my cold dead body, will I let my my private money rate float? And so I'm like, thank you, but no thank you. You're very sweet. I will not be doing any of that. And so, yeah, I just kind of pivoted that way to try to get fixed term debt, because I'm like, even if it's a shorter term, at least I know exactly what I'll be paying for the next 2 years when I run my numbers, versus like letting the Fed dictate my life as much. So
we were just at WealthCon a couple weeks ago. Ryan Pineda's BPCon, I guess. I don't know. They're all these big conferences. But there was a guy, I forget the guy's name, but he was talking about how he's raised like $1.8 billion over the last however many years, all from self-directed IRAs. And like, as we're kind of starting this journey of trying to like, use private money, I mean, as an investor, I'm sure like the nights where you're lying in bed just like scheming and stuff. But it's funny to have this conversation, because I was literally lying in bed last night thinking like, oh, these people might not have the cash, but like I'm sure they have retirement accounts, and like we could, potentially tap into that. And it's like, and then, like what is it doing for them in their accounts they have? Most people don't even know where it is or what it's invested in. So it's like, put it in something.
And it's interesting what the media has done to some people, where I'm like, the stock market just had its best year ever, and I still have friends that are terrified of the stock market right now. And I'm like, it's fascinating to me. And a lot of them are sitting on decently sized IRAs. So, but they don't want to put it all in stocks, but they like the idea of a good return. I'm like, lending money to you, or like getting money at 8 to 10% is a deal right now in some scenarios. Once you're beyond the friends and family discount, the interest rates get pretty market value. And so, kind of working with that to your favor, because I mean, like the stock market had this amazing return, because I still am like very heavy in investing, and that's like the other side of my portfolio. Like I'm a huge like index fund nerd. But I'm like, people are excited to get 8% because at least it's stable and it's connected to a physical piece of real estate, and people like that idea despite the stock market crushing it. But I'm not going to burst their bubble on that if they want to diversify into real estate. But it's good to be the boots on the ground person, because I'm like, real estate's my fun hobby that I get to go play in and make houses pretty, and they get to not fix toilets or be the person that gets the phone calls. So
I think we might have to have you back on so you can nerd out on the stock market, because I know nothing about that. I've only lost money.
Oh my word, I love talking about it. For a really long time, I want to do education pieces for like real estate investors that don't understand the stock market, but I'm like, my audience would be like 3 people.
It just grew to 5.
two of the 3.
personally, I feel like an old soul. Like I'm like, I don't trust the stock market. I want a tangible asset.
Yeah.
So the government's trying to take my money, but
we can talk all about it. There's so many parallels to real estate. I find it fascinating. Stock market people hate the crazy leverage real estate people and vice versa.
So like for somebody who is well versed in the stock market and knows how well it's doing, like is that just not your target client, or do you like what do you kind of pitch them to get them to work with you? Is it just like diversification or what?
Diversification. The best target is probably people that are afraid of the stock market, who want to be hands-off. Probably hands-off is number one, where they don't want to fix toilets, but they know real estate's a good idea. And that might be all they know. The other thing is adding a healthy fear of the stock market in helps you. Or if they're like they're younger-ish, like say 50 or younger, and, are heavy into bonds, and you're like, why would you be doing that? But anyway, so I'm like, at least I can outperform your bond return. Like I can do that all day. And so that's a pretty easy pitch. Yeah, those are kind of the areas I go into first is.
Can you outperform gold and canned food?
Yes. I don't know. Canned food's hot right now. The inflation rate of food is.
That's my dad right there. Gold, canned food, whatever.
It's
Like
so
whatever.
No.
I didn't mean that about your dad. That's great.
He'll get you. He'll get you, Josh.
I believe it. I'm scared of him.
But I'm a really boring like grandma investor. So I have a very like specific way I do my investments, which is kind of with the financial independence people that are on the other side of the crazy frugal side of things. But once you kind of figure that out, it's pretty easy. And so all my investing is pretty much set and forget. There's no day trading. There's no anything. You just kind of set it up and let it go.
So if you had $500,000 cash like in your hand right now, what would you do with it? Would you put it in the stock market or go buy some property?
Go buy some property. Because I've finally gotten to the point where I'm maxing out all of my tax advantage accounts that I have available to me, and putting money in brokerage isn't exciting to me. Like I already am maxing out HSA, 401k, maybe more in like a college fund. But I'm really happy with where I'm at with those investment vehicles. I'd probably pay off my private money and then go buy some other property. So yeah, because real estate's the fun part. So I'm like, once I kind of get these on autopilot where I'm on track to hit my goal for those, then I pivot over to real estate.
Well, so a quick disclaimer, none of this is financial advice, but
before I
ask my next question, but like, okay, so you answer that way if you had $500,000 with your great W-2 job right now. But let's say you're like, full-time investor and you come across some money like that. Would that change your technique a little bit? Would you then like put some away in a retirement account? I
guess if my W-2 job went tomorrow, I mean, honestly, the quickest way to get cash flow tomorrow would be pay off as many mortgages as I can, because then it ups my cash flow and all my properties I already have by like $1,000. Then my property managers that I love that might listen to this would probably get cut next, because I'd just self-manage at that point. Because I have a lot of Airbnbs and things going, and they're very labor intensive. Like if I had to walk one more senior citizen through how to use a Fire TV, I was going to beat my head against the wall. And I love all of our guests, but customer service is not my love language. And, but yeah, I've always dreamed about having a paid off real estate portfolio, because I feel like it takes less units. So, and that's kind of been like the lifestyle where I'm like, if I have 16 to 20 that are paid off, that seems a lot easier to go on vacation and leave behind with a handyman on call than, double that number, triple that number where you're cash flowing less per door. So that's kind of the direction eventually I want to head in, but it's really hard to stop the acquisition phase.
Another point we're at in our business right now, it's like we have properties that we could like optimize and probably pay down, but it's like we just want to go get more. So it's like, and I think you mentioned it earlier. It was like, what's that like number? And like, I think that's something it's like a moving target we're always trying to hit. So
this is supposed to be my year of finding my enough number. We'll see how that actually goes.
There's no number that's good. Like, because as soon as you get 100, then like 101, why not? I already have 100. Let's get one more.
Right.
Like, some people ask me that, like, how many are you trying to get? It's like, more. I don't know. There's not a number. Right. I don't think there's any point where I just stop.
Right. I was acquiring so quickly that, I mean, you guys probably have a lot more than I do, but I was acquiring so fast for me anyway that I'm like, I lost sight 7 furnished houses ago, really where if I was actually making any money from real estate. And then I got to the end of the tax year and I have like preliminary books done. And I'm like, I actually made money with real estate for the first time since 2018, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But I've just been, furnishing properties specifically is just so capital intensive that I just feel like I'm constantly broke and I have this like great salary and it all goes into houses. And so we're having a baby this year, me and my husband. So I got married in May and then we decided we're going to start a family. And I had so many friends going through infertility that we're like, we're going to try as soon as we're married. And like month number 1, we're like, oh shit, it's really happening. But we're really pumped. So this is supposed to be my year of slowing down and seeing how much cash flow I'm actually generating from the portfolio. Because the goal was always to cash flow enough to replace my income. But then every year I raise my income more and then I'm like it's like you're chasing something you can never catch, which is a good thing and a bad thing.
Man, that's such a terrible problem to have.
Terrible, very first world problem. But my goal eventually is to figure out how many units, the least number of units to get me that like 6,000 to 8,000 a month. So is really what I'm looking at. And I think I made, despite all of, like, I just feel like I bled out money and made nothing, but I was making about 3,000 a month last year. But we'll see how that actually works out this year when I hopefully stop acquiring things. Everyone in my family has lots of doubts whether I'm actually capable of stopping. So yeah, I'll let you know how that goes.
So we are going to jump to the last segment, our final 5. But before I do, so can you just kind of brief overview your favorite property that you own and how much money it makes you?
I have 2 favorites.
They're like your children. You love them all.
I don't love all of them. I sold 2 last year that I didn't love. I have unloaded all the ones that, like, there's some that I tolerate and others that I really like. Probably my original house hack, honestly. It's a mix of, the top was an Airbnb, which is the unit I lived in because I spent all this time like wallpapering and doing cool design when my child was sleeping upstairs. And then the bottom is a long-term. And that one's pretty awesome. And I have my original tenants I ever placed from 2018 living there. So even through the divorce, we like sold the house they lived in and I moved them into the house hack with me. It was a crazy scenario. I like rehomed my tenants into my home.
You got custody of the tenants.
Don't leave me.
Yeah, I'm like, don't leave me. And then this year I'm super excited. They're buying a new house for themselves. And I'm like very sad to see them go, but it's also been 5 years. So pretty cool.
Of course,
probably that one because I'm cash flowing about $1,000 a month on that house, like between 800 and 1,000. But it also kind of supports the machine that is furnishing houses. I don't really feel like I'm making that much off of that property a year, but that one does the best. And then I bought an off-market 4-plex once that is my other favorite child, just because it was pretty much turnkey and they had done almost every update that the house needed when I bought it. And so that was a pretty sweet deal. Yeah. And those are actually my 2 most expensive properties, but Indiana expensive. So
so like $100,000.
I think it was the original house hack. I think I bought for
that'll buy you a tent out in California where Colin's from.
$260. Yeah. And now it's like $315 at least. And then my 4-plex I bought for $265.
And what does your whole portfolio look like right now?
So I am an equal mix right now of furnished properties. So mostly Airbnb, but we try to do like midterm to travel nurses. And lately we've been getting into a lot of like relocation and also insurance claims. So there's been a ton of fires with all the cold in Indiana. I didn't know cold meant lots of like plumbing issues and fires. Like the plumbing makes sense. The fires is interesting. So, but we provide like housing assistance for people whose house burned down. So I have 8 and 8. So we have 16 properties. So 8 furnished like short-term, midterm type houses, and then 8 long-terms that are my favorite children actually, because they're the least labor intensive and I still self-manage those 8 and know all my tenants and things. But I've now handed off the 8 furnished houses to property management. And that's the best thing I've ever done. So.
Are you, for these like insurance claims, how are you connecting with them? Are you like
My property managers do it for me and then tell me the rate, and I get excited. So, but we have become a bit of a fire chaser, for better or worse. So I'm like if anyone sees a post on Facebook where it's like this relative has lost like their home or they had a fire and they need help, we actually have processes in place where we've now worked with insurance enough that we know how it is, and we can get them in a new house like that night, which is pretty cool. So, but they do a bulk of it. And then I like to think I help sometimes because I'll get calls or inquiries with people that just know we do that and help out. So
like, I just want to help, guys.
Yeah. So it's nice to know insurance because it's so confusing and they're so overwhelmed when they have like a giant plumbing leak or something terrible happen, that having us who like we have done this before for better or worse is people really appreciate that, even though it sounds a little sketchy to say out loud that like we figured out a way to know when any fire happens in the city of Fort Wayne.
All right. So I'll jump to our first question over here. So what is your go-to financial resource? How do you educate yourself?
All-time favorite book on investing is my all-time favorite book, just period. It's called The Simple Path to Wealth. It's by J.L. Collins. And the outside cover looks super boring, but he wrote it for his daughter and tried to make it really funny so she would care about finances. And then disclaimer, she didn't care about finances still, but now everyone has this really badass book that he's published, and it's fantastic. And it tries to make investing entertaining, so that's good.
So number 2, what advice would you give your younger self, like straight out of college?
Don't be afraid to, I guess, don't be afraid to prioritize yourself, because I had a lot of people tell me you'll never be happy chasing income, and it was never income. It was, I care about my family and I want to take cool vacations. I want to be able to spend money and go to the zoo if we want to do that. I want to be able to get like summer zoo passes and not have to worry about, different choices and things. And so it was all about lifestyle and kind of enjoying potentially retiring early before I'm forced to retire, which is where a lot of people end up. I think it's like 60% of Americans have to retire before they expect to. And so I just wanted the opportunity to do cool things with my kids and still travel and see the world. And the other thing would be, don't be afraid of real estate, and you don't have to be handy to do real estate, because that was really eye-opening. I learned the hard way because my husband was suddenly unavailable and he used to be the handyman, that I had to hire out like handyman and plumber. I remember the day I like met an HVAC guy for the first time. I'm like, this is like the blind leading the blind. Like, I grew up in a family. I tell the story on like every podcast I've done. My mom hates it every single time. That like my mom was gone one day and my dad hired a handyman to change light bulbs in our house because he didn't want to do it. And that's what I grew up in. So I knew how to do nothing. It was a lot of YouTube University and just meeting with people that were willing to educate you and kind of teach you about the different trades. I even bought like an electrical code book at one point to just like figure out what the heck I was doing with outlets and switches and things. So you don't have to be handy to do real estate. And now I outsource all of those things. I don't do any of my own maintenance. So
well, and like for somebody like me, I'm kind of handy, but I have none of the organizational skills that you possess. So there's always somebody out there that you can partner with too. So
you guys would be great partners, because I have no interest in doing any of the hands-on things, but I can make a spreadsheet.
That sounds good.
I don't do a lot. I'm just along for the ride. So I'm not handy. I'm not organized. What else am I not?
Motivating.
I'll be your biggest hype man.
There
Everybody needs help with that.
That's good.
All right. Our third question is, what's your big goal for the next 12? I guess you kind of already alluded to this. But I guess say it one more time. Goal for the next 12 months.
Slow down by having a baby, right?
My goal is to buy no houses this year, 0 properties acquired in 2024. And that is the hardest goal I've ever set for myself. And it sounds really pathetic when you say it out loud. But all the real estate people will understand and also be slightly confused why anyone would want to do that.
So fourth, our big emphasis is like getting people to do something right now. That's kind of our play on investing RN. So what would be something that you would tell people to do right now that could change their financial outlook?
My other favorite book is called Set for Life. It's by Scott Trench. It's one of the Bigger Pockets books. And I think looking back now, I didn't realize I did it until I was like in the midst of house hacking, that I really did the 3 like main pillars that he talks about, where people like try to penny pinch and save and coupon, but really you have your big 3. You can get your income up, housing costs down, and car costs down. And so I really did all 3 of those, which is kind of why I have this lovely investing portfolio built up and was able to buy all this real estate now, is really because I set myself up very well, where I don't own a car. I house hacked for years. I now live in a house with a very large mortgage that I don't want to talk about with my new husband. I'm pained every month. I pay a real mortgage, and coming from house hacking to real mortgage life at a 7% or 6.99 interest rate is a really hard thing to hit, but we needed the space. It's nice to finally have moved on. And just trying to say, okay, what if I woke up today and didn't have vehicle costs? Like, I don't pay for gas, I don't pay for car maintenance, I don't pay for any of that. And it's just things you don't think are really possible. Those are always fixed line items in somebody's budget, or something they just take for granted. And just kind of sit down and think and brainstorm, like, what if I could get my income up? What if I could leave my job? What if I could find a company that gave me a car and I didn't have to pay this like huge gas bill every month? And just focusing on those kind of 3 areas where you're like, what if I bought a house with a shed in the backyard? We Airbnb because my wife will not share walls with anyone. There's so many different ways to house hack, and a lot of cities especially are doing like containers and different programs. Could you move to a house on acreage and do something like that? Glamping, I don't know. You can always figure out creative ways to figure out those 3 problems. So.
All right. Our final question is, what's the biggest financial mistake that you've made? And what did you learn from it? What can we learn from it? I don't know.
I became a really bad house flipper this summer. That was probably one of my top financial mistakes. I'm like, I'm going to buy this house, and I still don't, like, I don't have time to do all the work because I'm doing so many other things. Like, something has to give. The secret ingredient is definitely the work from home job, because it gives you flexibility, but I still can't go work on projects and stay employed. So I think, just becoming a house flipper, when I always said like my goal isn't flipping, it's buy and hold. And it was a good way to pay off private money, but I pretty much didn't make anything when I flipped this house, and I spent 3 months like dying over it. And it didn't really turn into anything exciting. Like, it was definitely negatively impacted my summer. And I think I maybe made $1,000 on it. It was really depressing.
We just experienced that.
So I need to stay true to myself and my goals, I think, is a big thing. The other piece, which isn't a mistake, is obviously getting married to someone that your goals don't align, but it was such a surprise too, but there are definitely warning signs. But I mean, people always say my worst piece of advice that people give is like, choose the right spouse. And it is very true, but you can choose the wrong one and correct your actions. So there is that kind of piece of wisdom out there, because I think I beat myself up a long time for like, how did I end up in this situation and getting divorced? And now I have this amazing guy that's actually supportive. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, for a long time, my greatest fear was being the divorced person. And now it's kind of like a badge of honor. And other fellow divorcees or people that are having marriage problems just like find you. And like, there's a secret club out there of people that just want to say, like, how you get it, right? So it's not as bad as you think being on the other end of it. It just sucks at the time.
Well, we're equally bad at flips, so.
I'm a one and done house flipper is my dream. I hope to never do that again. It was so bad.
That's essentially what we did on accident. So
we made $1,000, much like you did
for
2 years of work.
Yeah.
So much work.
Yeah.
And I was like checking the job site all the time and just like always talking to people, and the tenants, like the original tenants when I bought it, like wouldn't leave, and it was a whole, and then the only buyers we got were FHA, and the longest list of items needed fixed, and it was rough. But you're like, I'd rather sell it than. So I'm like, oh, what's it? And then by the end, you're like, I don't even know what's happening. Like my bookkeeping was so good, and at the last month, it was just like, I'm just writing checks. I have no flipping clue like where I'm at with it. So.
At least it was only 3 months and not 2 years like ours. So
Yay, there you go.
You beat us there.
Yeah.
Barely.
But yeah, this has been great. I mean, for us and hopefully for everyone else. But where can people reach out to you to get a little more info on what you're doing?
So I, for better or worse, live on Instagram. So I'm under Sarah King Invests. It used to be Nerd's Guide to 𝗫. But then when I was trying to network locally, everyone was very confused by what is 𝗫, financial independence, like what is that? And so I'm like, Sarah King Invests. We're just keeping it easy. So Instagram, I have a Facebook under that title. I don't have Twitter anymore. I'm on TikTok, but I have like one video. So, and then I pretty much just like watch cats and like people painting walls. So, whew, crushing it. So, have a 4-year-old, they said.
Yeah.
So if you need anything, DM me on Instagram. I still answer all of those.
Oh, cool.
That's how I found her. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a
thank you.
pleasure.
Yeah. So this is a blast.
Super fun. Well, thanks for having me.